Good evening. Uh, I'm Trudy, and I'm coming to you tonight with the book of Ruth in its entirety, chapters 1 through 4. And we're going to get started right here because this is a very interesting story. Some of you may be aware of it, um, but we're going to make sure that we go through it in its entirety. And it starts off in the very first verse of Ruth 1 and 1. Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled. Now, we remember when the judges ruled, there were no kings at all. So they had gone through a period of over 400 years of anarchy and oppression when they just did not have a king to actually give direction and stuff. So this is letting us know the period or the era of where they were. And we do remember that in the book of Judges, we talked about Gideon, Samson, and Deborah, just to name a few people that were actually brought up for particular reasons, but then went back into obscurity because we didn't hear anything else about them. And then it was a time when everyone just did what was right in their own eyes. And then that there was a famine in the land. Now that was interesting because when God brought over the children of Israel into the promised land, that he promised to provide for them as long as they were obedient to them. So now we find that there had to be something going on in disobedience because now there's a famine in the land. And a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to dwell in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his sons. He has two sons. So when we start to look at all of these different things, it's very interesting when we look at why they're moving, because we say, yes, there was a famine, but Bethlehem stands for house of bread. So if you're living in the house of bread and there is no food, what is the real problem that's going on? What is the level of disobedience that we have to question in the scripture? Okay. So then it goes on and then it talks about him actually going out. He's going out. And he didn't intend to stay out, but he did go out. So then it goes on to the second verse. Then it goes into the man of the man. The name of the man was Amalek. Amalek. Okay. The name of the wife was Naomi, and the name of the two sons was Mahlon and Chilion, Ephraimites of Bethlehem, Judah. And they went out to the country and remained there. Then Amalek, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her two sons. Now they took wives of the women of Moab. Now, when we stop right there, we already see that they have two sons that they actually took over there. And anytime that you have a widow that is left without a mate, you start to go into a different issue. So the sons actually took on wives themselves. But here's the twist. They were always warned about not mixing and actually marrying outside of their particular sector, because they did not want to have the religions mixed and compromised anymore. But here we see the two boys, they actually stayed in this place and they actually took wives on who were of Moabites, and they were known to be pagans. So now we're in a pagan nation where we have children of Israel that have gone over and they've taken wives that practice paganism. And then they talk about the names of the two wives is Orpah, and the other's name was Ruth. And they dwelt together for 10 years. So they was very short-lived when we start to look at it. Then both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and the women survived her two sons and her husband. So Naomi lasted longer than her whole entire family. Now, we know in previous lessons where we talked about what happens with that when you don't have a male to actually fend for you or protect you, you become subjected to the generousness or kindness of others, basically charity. So because you don't have that. Then when it talks about the three widows head back to Judah. Because they knew that there was nothing that was going to be for them there, Naomi wanted to go back to her home from where she came. So they rose with the daughter-in-laws, and she might return from the country of Moab. From she had heard in the country of Moab that the Lord had visited his people and was giving bread. So where she came from, she heard that some good things was going on. So therefore she went out from the place where she was, and her two daughter-in-laws with her, and they went on their way to return to the land of Judah. So because she had heard the good news of what was going on, she was like, I don't have anything here. I don't have any family here. So it is a good move for me to look to actually move on. So then they actually go about and they start the trip or the trek to actually leave where they are in Moab to actually go back to Bethlehem. And then it goes on and it says, but Naomi, when she was thinking about this, she thought about herself, and she said for her daughter-in-laws, because they were both young and they were both young widows, she told them, go ahead and you go back to your mother's house. You don't have to go with me. You've dealt, the Lord has dealt kindly with you, and you have dealt with the dead and with me. I appreciate everything that you've done, but you need to go ahead so that you can find you a husband and have an opportunity to have family. And then so when she actually talked to the two daughter-in-laws, they were like, no, we're going to be with you. We want to be with you. And we want to, we're with you. We're family. We're going to stick together. And then it goes on to talk about later that it says, and they said to her, surely we will return with you to your people. But Naomi said, turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Are there still sons in your womb? So she was really concerned about them having children and moving on and actually having a family. And then it later says, would you restrain yourselves of having husbands? No, my daughters, for it grieves me very much for your sakes that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. So she's talking about the devastation that she suffered in losing her husband and then losing her sons and then having these two daughter-in-laws that are suffering the same things, except for the plight is that they were never able to be mothers. So she is expressing that there's no reason that they have to stay with her at this particular point. But as we actually go out, then we see that they both the daughter-in-laws and Naomi, they start on the trek to go back. And then they cried. They wept about the situation. And then Orpah actually thought about it. And as they start to travel out, they went about 4 miles outside of Moab, and Orpah thought about it, and she just said, I have to go back. And with that, she kissed her mother-in-law and she departed from her. And then it's said that, when she went back, she was able to actually find her a husband, and actually she became the mother of 4 sons, and she was actually the mother of Goliath and 3 other sons. So that was the interesting part for her. So there was a reason in the planning of all of what was going on, even though it seemed very tragic, but there was still something that was in the story to be born. Then it goes on that Ruth herself, she didn't turn around. She hung on to her mother-in-law. And the most famous thing about Ruth was that Ruth was convinced that she would do whatever it took to be with Naomi. And she says here that, or turn back from the following after you, for wherever you go, I will go, and for wherever you lodge, I will lodge. For your people shall be my people, and your God be my God. So Ruth had a sense of ownership and responsibility and true love for Naomi, even though she was just her mother-in-law, and that there was nothing to that, but she was willing to risk it all just to be with her, just because she had that type of love for Naomi. And it was just such an elegant way to express the faith that she had, that wherever that her mother-in-law would go, that it would be good for both of them. So then she goes out in that way. Then it goes that Naomi returns with Ruth back to Bethlehem. And then when everybody sees them, they're like, oh my goodness, Naomi's back, and everybody's excited. But Naomi comes back with a different perspective. She tells them now, don't call me Naomi, call me Mara, because now I am of bitterness. That's what the name means, of bitter. And because she left joyously with a husband and 2 children, and now she comes back without her family, and she has Ruth that's actually with her, but she's now believing that because of the disobedience that God has dealt with her bitterly. So now she is calling herself bitter with the name of Mara. And it says, because she really felt that God had afflicted her and with the situations that she was going on. So in 22, so Naomi returns, and Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, is with her and returns from the country of Moab. Now they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of barley harvest. So now we remember that when you come into the harvest, that that there's getting ready to be plenty that's going on. And we know God always makes provision for those that are disenfranchised, those that are going through hard times. He always makes provisions. But here we find that Naomi and Ruth are actually very resourceful. So in the 2nd chapter, it goes, there was a relative of Naomi's husband, a man of great wealth of the family of Amalek. His name was Boaz. Okay, so here's our introduction of Boaz, that Boaz was a great man that God had actually blessed, but he was not only a great man of wealth, but he was a great man of God. And then it goes on to say, so Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, please let me go to the field and glean heads of grain after him, in whose sight I may find favor. Now, she remembered that every particular field that was actually planted, that they were never able to actually completely harvest everything, because the way that the law and the provisions that were made, that there was only a partial amount of the actual fields that could actually be plowed up or redeemed. So they had to leave a certain percentage for the poor, for the foreigners, to make sure that there was always food in abundance for people. So this is where Ruth was basically talking about, let me go, they'll look kindly on us, and they'll allow us to actually have this. And so Naomi tells her, go, my daughter. Then she left, and she went and she gleaned in the field after the reapers. And she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, and who was the family of Amalek. So this is where their first encounter starts here. And then so she goes and she starts to work in Boaz's field. And as she goes to do this, she's a diligent worker. So she goes and she doesn't make a big fuss about anything. She works, hard, and she goes and she does the work. And it says, now Boaz, who came from Bethlehem, said to the reaper, the Lord be with you. And they answered him, the Lord blesses you. Then Boaz said to his servant, who was in charge of the reapers, whose young woman is this? So he took notice of who she was. So it is said that Ruth was very pretty. So he took notice of her. So the servant was who was in charge of the reaper answered and said, it's the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. And she said, please let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves. So she came and continued from morning until now, though she rested a little in the house. So they were just saying that she was a good worker. She only took a little break, but she's right in here with them, and she's making it happen. So it gives, that she's earning her keep. She's just not taker, but she's earning her keep. And then Boaz actually speaks to Ruth, and he speaks to her very kindly. So he says, you will listen, my daughter, will you not? Do not go to glean in another field. So here's Boaz already making his move. He's like, look here, you can stay right here. Don't go anywhere else. You're good. You're good right here. And then he tells them later on, stay close to my young women. So he wants to make sure that she's okay, that she's taken care of. And it says, let your eyes be on the field which you reap and go after them. Have I not commanded the young men not to touch you? So he's already put this claim out. Don't touch her. Ladies, you help her, take care of her. He's already put the protection on it. And he told her that when you get thirsty, you go drink from the vessel. So here Ruth has got all this favor in the attention of Boaz already. And then we go on, and then it talks about his kindness, his over kindness, because, she could have came and said, well, I'm a foreigner, you have to do this. But we look at the attitude that she had. She had a wonderful attitude in her approach. Even though sometimes you know what you're entitled to, but you don't have to come out with an attitude of that everything is owed to you. But sometimes you step back and you let it all play out. And then it goes to the 10th through the 13th verse. It comes out. It says, the Lord repay your work, and a full reward be given you by the Lord God of Israel under the wings who you have come for refuge. Then she said, let me find favor in your sight, my Lord, for you have comforted me and have spoken kindly to your maidservants, though I am not like one of your maidservants. So he dealt very fairly with her, and she was very gracious with him about how he treated her. Even though she was not from around there, she was not his actual maidservant, but he showed her all of the accommodations and the niceties that he would show other people. So then it goes on to talk about Boaz continues to show great favor to Ruth. He's like really into Ruth. He's looking at this point, but he says, come here and eat the bread and dip your piece of bread in a vinegar. So they're sitting in close proximity, because if she can dip her bread in the vinegar, that means they have to be sitting close to each other. So she sat beside the reaper, and he passed the parched grain to her, and she ate and was satisfied and kept some back. Now, when we going out and we kind of like somebody, we kind of don't try to overeat, I'll just have a salad, This is kind of how Ruth was doing here, that she was holding back not to overextend and just all out, just eat. But she ate till she was satisfied, and then she held back as well. And then so it goes on and says, let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not reproach her. Also let grain from the bundle fall purposely for her. Leave it that she may glean, and do not rebuke her. So he's laying out the rules for her, that she has this kind of exception that's going on. And he wanted to make sure that she was okay. He made plans, he made provisions for her. And it was just like, don't bother her. Don't reprimand her. Let her go. If she drops something, it's okay. Let her have it. So we see that something is actually developing at this point. It's not laid out, but it is developing. So then it goes on that she gleaned until the end of the day. And then so it says, so she gleaned until the evening and beat out what she had gleaned. And it was about an ephah of barley. Then she took it up and went into the city with her mother-in-law, and that she had gleaned. So she brought out and gave her what she had and kept back after she had satisfied. So the stuff that she had ate earlier, she took a portion to save for Naomi. And then whatever she got and that she gleaned after the fact. So she's coming here with a full day's work, as well as, you might as well say, she got groceries. She brought groceries home. So her and Naomi were okay. They were okay. Then it goes on. Naomi praises God for the goodness that is actually befallen on Ruth at this point. So it says, it is good, my daughter, that you go out with this young woman, and that people do not meet you in any other field. So as we remember, Boaz says, you don't have to go nowhere. You good right here. So Naomi's actually reaffirming these things for her, because Naomi, and in her wisdom, she already sees how this is actually playing out. So you might as well say that Naomi is kind of giving her confidence, giving Ruth confidence about what's actually going on. So she says, so she stayed close by the young women of Boaz to glean until the end of the barley harvest and wheat harvest, and she dwelt with her mother-in-law. So she stayed intact. She didn't go and she didn't start doing and fraternizing all these things. She stayed the course. So then we go to 3. 3 talks about the security of Ruth through a kinsman. Now, we remember talking about this before, that if you had a brother and your brother passed away and he had a wife, they had no children, that his other brothers could actually consummate with his wife, with the deceased brother's wife, to actually be able to carry on the name or the inheritance or legacy of the deceased brother. So this is where we're talking about the kinsman, the one that's able to redeem. So then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, my daughter, shall I not seek security for you? So she's like, okay, Ruth, what's going on here? Now you guys are doing all these things. I'm seeing what's going on. So she says, so should I not seek security? Meaning, should I not look for someone for you? That it may be well with you. Now Boaz, whose young women you are with, is he not our relative? So she's like, okay, let me tell you about this. Let's like, Boaz is in the line. He is one of our kinsmen. And so as they're going on and they talk about it, is that he is a kinsman redeemer. Now, that means that he has the responsibility to actually come in and redeem property, prosperity, basically. And then he was considered what they call a goel. A goel is a kinsman redeemer that has the responsibility, and it's a little more than just a kinsman redeemer, more of what they call a chieftain. So he has a lot of weight on who he is in the family. So when she asked, is he not a relative? And he's a part of Amalek's family. So of Naomi's deceased husband. So here he is. He's that person that can actually redeem. So Naomi instructs Ruth on how to petition Boaz and to express or exercise his responsibility as her goel. Now, here's where they say the wisdom of older women come in. Naomi actually told her what to do. She was like, girl, get up, clean up yourself, you put on all your best and make sure that you smell good. Then she tells her how to approach him. Then she says that do not make yourself known to him until he has finished eating and drinking. Then it shall be, when he lies down, you shall notice the place where he lies, and you shall go in, uncover his feet, and lie down, and he will tell you what you should do. And she said to her, all that you say to me, I will do. So Naomi's telling her how to finesse this situation. So she's like, look, let him get his fill of food and drink. And then when he has laid down, you want to go to where he's laying, and that you want to remove the cover from his feet. And then the reason that Boaz is actually in the barley where all his grain is, basically. And it's called the threshing floor. So she's actually on the threshing floor. And the reason that he's there, because they were known to have gangs that would come in and actually steal and rob for, the grain and stuff like that. So he's actually there protecting his grain. So he's sitting there, and as you start to look at it, well, why was she at his feet? Well, that was just a sign of submission. A lot of the things that happen in the Bible that, women are deemed very different. So there was this total level of submission to him. And that is why she was laying at his feet. And then so as she went on, they continued in this, and uh, Boaz is laying there, and he moves and stirs. And as he stirs, he notices that there's someone there, and it startles him. And he calls out. It says, so he went out to the that her request was that when they went down, and like I said, it was about midnight when it actually startled him. And there was a woman laying at his feet. And he said, who are you? And she answered, I am Ruth, your maidservant. Take your maidservant under your wing, for you are a close relative. Now, here, Ruth is actually explaining who she is, because not before did she identify as his maidservant. But now she's saying that I am your maidservant. Take your maidservant under your wing, meaning ask him to take her under your protection, your covering. This is what I need from you, because you are a close relative, letting him know that he is a kinsman redeemer. Because when you say, take me under your wing, take me under your protection, marry me. This is what she's actually saying to him, for he is actually a close relative, because he was a descendant of Amalek. You know, they were all in the same family. But as Boaz said, then he said, blessed are you, the Lord, my daughter, for you have shown more kindness at the end than at the beginning, in that you did not go after young men, and whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you have requested, for all the people of my town know that you are a virtuous woman. So here he talks about who she was, and that he was basically flattered that she came to him, because he's like, I assumed that you would be going for the younger man, not somebody like me. So he's actually a little flattered at this point when we start to talk about it. And he says, Boaz considered himself unattractive because, he was older than her. We can assume that. And Ruth was actually identified as being pretty. And so he kind of ruled out any type of romantic relationship between them because of that. So then they go on, and as they're talking, because they talked about the virtuous woman, and what that meant was that she was known by what they call the Hebrew word Hayil, a Hayil woman, which meant that she was strength, she had moral strength, good quality, integrity, and virtue. So this was the reputation that Ruth had coming into a foreign land, not knowing anyone, but this is what she displayed, that she was called from an unknown to a virtuous woman. So here's where the problem came in, that in all of this, that yes, Boaz was a kinsman redeemer, but there was someone else that was a closer kinsman redeemer. So when that all came about, he had to figure out how to do this, because he had to do it correctly. And he says, but if this kinsman redeemer won't fulfill redeeming you, he says, but if he does not want to perform the duty for you, then I will perform the duty for you. As the Lord lives, lie down until morning. So she's still there with him, and they've had this conversation, but he wants to make sure that he protects her integrity. So he doesn't want her to go out in the night, but he just tells her to stay there until the morning. And then Ruth actually returns home, where we're in 14 and 15, that he actually sends her home. And she arose, and so that no one could recognize her. And it says, do not let it be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. So she doesn't want anybody else he doesn't want anybody else to know that, because of the other kinsman redeemer. And then it goes on and says, bring the shawl that is on you and hold it. And then she held it, and he measured 6 ephahs of barley and laid it on her. And she went to the city. So he was such a gentleman that he let her go home, even though there was nothing between them. But just because of the proposition of how it came forth, that he sent her home with 6 handfuls of grain. So it's just like a gentleman that's trying to court you, that, you spend a nice evening together, and he's thoughtful enough to either send you home with flowers or, something to remember him by, most the way you could actually say. And so she goes home to tell Ruth about, Naomi, about what happened. So she says, so when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, is that you, my daughter? Then she told her what the man had done for her. And she said, the 6 ephahs of barley he gave me, for he said to me, do not go empty-handed to your mother-in-law. So he was making it responsible that during the time that she was away from him, that when she came back, that she had something to actually reverence this mother-in-law that she had, because that was probably at this point when she found out about the other kinsman redeemer, it probably caused her some anxiety. She's thinking, because she's sitting here with Boaz, she looks at Boaz, she likes Boaz, but now to find there's someone else that's in the picture that they have to go and confer with. Then it goes on in 4. It says Boaz meets with the kinsman redeemer at the city gates. We know the relevance of the city gates is that where all the business is handled at that point. So Boaz went to the gate and sat down there, and behold, the close relative of whom Boaz had spoken came by. Now, it's not mentioned what his name is. It's probably not even necessary, because he didn't want to do the deal anyway. So, come aside, friend, sit down here. So he came and he sat down, and he took 10 men of elders of the city, and he sat down beside it, and they did sit down. So when they sat down, they went and they started to deliberate on what was going on. And then he told him about him being the kinsman redeemer, that he was the nearer kinsman redeemer, and what was actually going on. And then he tells him, and he says, then he said to the close relative, Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, sold a piece of land which belonged to our brother Elimelech. And I thought to inform you, saying, buy it back, because kinsmen redeemers can actually buy back property. So it is always known, because God, when the plan had went out for all of the allotment of land, he intended it for all to stay within certain families. This is how he had it, certain tribes, how they all divided these things. So if someone sold their property and they could not get it, or they forfeited, a kinsman redeemer could come back and actually redeem the property. So this is what they're kind of talking about. So as he presents it to him, he tells him that you can do this. So Naomi and Ruth are close by, so they're actually kind of listening to what's going on. And then it says, buy it back from the present inhabitants and the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not redeem it, tell me, that I may know, and there is no one but you to redeem it, and I am next after you. So here's how Boaz is setting up his case. He's very strategic in how he's doing this, and we'll see this later on. So then he goes on to talk about the piece of land, and then the nearest kinsman redeemer says, I will do it. I will redeem. And then, Ruth and Naomi are listening and watching, and they're like, they probably just like, oh no, because Ruth really had her eyes set on Boaz as well as Naomi. So here it goes into the next verse. It says, then Boaz said, on the day you buy a field from the hand of Naomi, you must also buy it from Ruth the Moabite, the wife of the dead, to perpetuate the name of the dead through his inheritance. So now here's the twist that's brought in. Not only did he find out about there was property to redeem from Naomi, but now because the Moabite woman, which was Ruth, who was married and now was a widow, that she had an inheritance, that he had to buy it from her as well. And then he also knew that because of the redemption, the way that Boaz actually set it up, that it was a package deal. You'd have to buy all together. It was all or none. You could not do it. And as the man, he thought about it, and he says, I can't redeem it for myself, lest I ruin my own inheritance. You deem my right of redemption for yourself, for I cannot redeem it. So here we kind of figure out what was going on is that he did not want to have question in his own inheritance, because he probably figured that he already had a wife, he already had children, um, and that you would have to make allotment for future children. So it could really mess up some things for him. So I guess as he thought about it, it just that did not work for him. And not only to interrupt his current lifestyle, he just didn't want to do it. So that was news to Boaz's ear, because at that point he was actually free to be the kinsman redeemer for Naomi and for Ruth. And then so they were happy to hear this. They were just overjoyed that this was happening. So now there's the freedom to actually go through and continue on with the marriage. So they actually went through and they followed their customs, and they were actually married. Then Boaz's announcement to the elders of the people, and it says, "You are witness this day that I have brought all that Amalek and all that the Chilians and Malans from the hands of Naomi. Moreover, Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, I acquired as my wife to perpetuate the name of the dead through his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not cut off from among his brethren and from his position at the gate. You are the witness this day." So he's solidifying what's actually going on, and he's making sure that all are witness. That's why it's so important that there are witnesses to your love, to your marriage, that everybody can attest to what is going on. We talk about things happening at the gate. This is where they handle business, at the gate. We usually go to altars, we used to go to civil things, but it's always something that will give witness to what actually took place. We get certificates, marriage license, and different things like that. And then it says the blessing of the witnesses at the wedding. All the people that were at the gates of the elders, we are witnesses. So there it is right there. And then it talks about at this point, it says, and that may the house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring which the Lord will give you from this young woman. So they knew that with Boaz and actually Ruth getting together, that there would be this forever marking or solidification of the family of Amalek, of Mahlon. His basic name would continue on with this particular union. And then it says that they were thinking like Leah and Rachel were. And these two had 13 children between them and were the mothers of the whole nation of Israel. So something great was going to be out of this particular union, because that's why they made that reference to Rachel and Leah, actually, who is coming to your house like Rachel and Leah. So there was greatness that was going to come out of this union. And then go on to the next portion where Boaz and Ruth has their first child. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he went into her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. And then the life of Naomi is actually blessed at this point, because remember when she returned, she said her name was Mara because it was bitter. But now she's feeling the blessing of the Lord. The redemption has been upon her at this point. Then the woman said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without close relatives." So Naomi was actually able to witness, because of the faithfulness of Ruth, of staying with her and loving her completely, that she was able to bore Naomi a grandson, and she was able to see her grandson, to hold her grandson, and she actually became the nurse to her grandson. So she was gracious to God at this point, because this was a marvelous demonstration of what God can do through one poor woman who gets it right with him. When she went back home, she got it right. She got it right. She came out of a pagan nation and she did the right thing. And then this is the interesting thing that happened with actually this union between Boaz and Ruth. They were the great grandparents to David, king of Israel. So, and we look at the lineage that it starts to talk about that they had a son whose name was Obed, and he had a son who was named Jesse, who had a son who was named David, and David had a descendant named Jesus. So this was a wonderful love story that, when we get it right with God, God has everything planned out and everything will go right with him. So I hope that you've enjoyed the story about Ruth. I ask that you go back and dive into it yourself, because there's such sumptuous nuggets in it, and that you will actually enjoy and know just what the plan that God has for you, that even though we may get off track, that he still loves us enough to reward us openly and to make our life so much better. If you don't know Jesus Christ as in the pardon of your sins, I ask today that you just repeat after me. You say, Father, in the name of Jesus, I come to you at this time with an open heart, asking you to come into my heart. Lord, I believe that you died on the cross and that you rose on the third day and that you're coming back for me, Lord. I need you and I give my life to you. All things all old things are passed away and I am brand new in you. Now, if you just repeated that or just said that in your heart, that it is just that easy. You are saved. It's just that way. Now, if you would need some additional help, you can put in the chat your name and information, and we can get back with you and help direct you to a Bible-based church or answer questions for you, and just make sure that you understand. And welcome to the family. Welcome to the family. God bless you all. Have a good evening.